In the last video, we managed to get our database schema created and migrated to Postgres. Before we can do any data manipulation using CRUD functionality, we need some sort of front-end user interface to interact with the database. If you recall from previous lessons using Flask on the Thorin project, we use something called template inheritance. This allows us to extend various HTML templates to avoid duplicating code, such as a navbar or footer that's identical across all pages. Also, in the introduction video, we discussed the use of a CSS framework called Materialize, which will be used throughout this project. This will allow us to make use of the responsive behaviors using the grid system, similar to Bootstrap, and various components to make our application more user-friendly. At the time of recording, the latest version of Materialize is 1.0.0, as you can see in the top left corner of their site. The first thing that we need to do is to grab the CDN link and script tags from the Getting Started page. We'll paste the CSS link within our base template head element, and then paste the JavaScript tag at the bottom of our body element. With Materialize, you can use the components with or without jQuery, so if you decide to use jQuery, you'll want to include that just before the Materialize script. In addition to using Materialize, we are going to incorporate some of our own custom CSS and JavaScript. When using a templating language such as Flask, any assets that we use such as images, CSS, and JavaScript need to be stored in a directory called static. Let's create this new folder within our Task Manager package, and we'll also want to add the CSS and JS folders within this static directory. As with tradition, we'll call our CSS file style.css and our JavaScript file script.js in their respective folders. Now, in order to link any static file that we have, it's important to note that we must use the correct syntax. You should be rather familiar with just adding the standard front-end method. However, with templating languages, this method can cause errors or the files not loading properly. We must use double curly brackets and then use the URL_for method, which takes two values. The first value is the static directory, so it knows to look within this main folder. Separate the values with the comma, and then we need to use filename equals css/style.css, and make sure to watch out for the double versus single quotes. As you can see, I'm using the double quotes to wrap the entire href property. Then, for anything within the href, I've used single quotes, because by using double quotes again, it will think that our href is finished and throw a syntax error. Let's do the same exact thing for our JavaScript file. The script source will use double quotes, wrapping everything in double curly brackets, and the URL_for method points to our static file in single quotes. Then a comma to separate the file name, which is equal to js/script.js in single quotes, pointing to our JS folder and the file itself. You don't need to use this method for any external CDN links, such as the Materialize links, for example. It's only needed for any files that we actually own within our workspace or project, including images. This is due to the fact that you're working with a framework, which relies on using URL_for methods to find the relevant files locally to your own project. Also, quite often when working with templating languages, if you make changes to your CSS or JavaScript files, then reload the page, it might not show your changes. This is very likely an issue to do with caching, so here are 3 steps to also remember to check. First, try a hard reload, which is generally Ctrl-Shift-R in most cases, but depending on your computer and which browser you use, it could be one of these combinations on screen. Second, if that doesn't work, open a new incognito window with your project URL. And if you do see the changes, it's certainly a caching issue, since incognito doesn't store cache. Finally, if neither of those options work, stop the application in your terminal from running and just restart it. This may sound asinine, but quite often with Flask and Django, a fresh restart of the app is required to take effect of any new additions to your code. Now that we have our static files connected to the base template, let's start adding a few components, such as a navbar. From the Materialize docs, click on Components to expand it, then click Navbar. We'll be using the Mobile Collapse option, which will make a responsive navbar for smaller screens. Copy the code, and let's paste it within a header tag, which will replace our text of Hello World. The reason why it shows the unordered list twice is because one is for the navbar at the top of the page, and the other is for our mobile side navbar. If you recall from the introduction video, Materialize has a variety of colors to choose from, whether it's for text or elements. I'm going to change the default pink navbar to include a class of light blue, darken 1, but feel free to choose any color you'd like. For the logo, we'll just call the project Task Manager and have it load our main page when clicked. Similar to our static files, we need to use the URL_for method for any links within our project. Double curly brackets, URL_for, and then in single quotes, the name of your Python function to call, which is home. If you recall from our routes.py file, this is the only route that we've created so far, and we've called it home, which will render the base.html template. We don't need to include the static or file name properties since this is calling an actual function. Again, using this approach is very important, so if you only type href equals base.html, then your project won't compile properly by Flask, and you'll likely get an error. We're going to have 3 links within our navbar, so we'll remove their sample links. These links will be home, new task, and categories. We already have the function created for our home link, so we can copy that and paste it within the hrefs. Since we haven't created the other 2 functions or routes yet, then we cannot include those as placeholder links. If we try to load the site using placeholder links, Flask will throw an error saying that it can't find the intended function you're attempting to call. For the mobile menu icon, the Materialize docs includes Google's material design icons, so you're welcome to use those, but be sure to include the CDN link from the icons page. However, Font Awesome contains over 1,000 more icons to choose from, so I'll include the Font Awesome CDN link from the CDN.js library site. I'll copy the link tag and paste it within my head element before the Materialize CDN link, then replace the menu icon with the Font Awesome icon instead. Next, even though we don't have the Python functions created, I'm going to duplicate the home link and create empty links for the others now. The second link will be for adding a new task, and the final link will be for all categories. Remember, these need to be blank href links for now, so we'll delete the path, and then we can go ahead and copy these 2 links, then paste them below in the side nav list. In order for the side nav to work, we need to initialize the JavaScript functionality from Materialize. Let's copy the initialization code, either the vanilla JavaScript snippet, or if you're using jQuery, the snippet below. Then let's paste it within our script.js file. We are actually going to be using a few elements from Materialize, so let's give our variables a more unique name. The query selector will be sideNav, and then we'll just initialize that without defining any variable. The next section will be where all of our main content will be injected, so we'll use the template inheritance block element. Let's wrap this inside of a semantic main element with the Materialize class of container. In exactly the same way that we did on our previous Flask lessons, we'll call this block element content, making sure to close the end block tag as well. Before we create any templates that extend this, we'll quickly add a Materialize footer. Paste the footer below the main element, and you can style this any way you'd like, but I'll keep it simple and clean by removing some unnecessary links. It'll be blue darken 3, removing the container link section, adding for educational purposes only, then a link to Code Institute in a new blank tab. Since we've been using semantic HTML elements such as header, nav, main, and footer, we can simply force the footer to stay at the bottom of the page by using the sticky footer CSS code. Paste that within your CSS file, and this will make the footer always stay at the bottom of the page, no matter how much or how little content is on each page. Now, we can start using the template inheritance functionality and extend our base template across various files. Let's create a new template in the templates directory and call it tasks.html, which is where we will display any task that will be stored within our database later. This will use the extends block, which will extend our base.html template. This means that by extending from the base template, anything created on our base template will display on this page as well, which includes our navbar and footer. Then we'll inject anything from this tasks template into the content block element, making sure to close the end block as well. We will add the content for this page in a later video. So for now, let's simply just add an H3 element for tasks with some materialize helper classes. Finally, let's go back to our routes.py file and update the rendered template to be tasks.html instead. This will become our home page now, so that when a user visits our site, they're brought to the tasks page, which will automatically extend all of the content from our base template. Save all of your files, and if your app isn't currently running, go ahead and start it within the terminal by typing python3 run.py and then open your browser. Remember to hard reload the page or use incognito mode if your static files with the CSS or JavaScript aren't working for you. Otherwise, check for a possible typo on your code. Everything looks great so far and behaves as expected, even our mobile navbar if we decrease the width of the page. We now have the basic front-end template set up with a navbar, a footer, and a tasks template that uses the template inheritance to extend from the base file. In the next lesson, we are going to start working with the database and performing some CRUD functionality. For now, go ahead and push your code to GitHub, and I'll see you on the next video.